But I welcome you to Civic Space TV. This is the Uganda Diaspora Show. And now, today in particular, we are going to look at Kenya elections and their effect on the East African community. Lessons we can pick as Uganda. My name is Lynn, Komugisha, and I work with Vision Group. I'm glad to have you today, but I also work, of course, for Civic Space TV. And join our conversations, those of you who are joining us for the first time on Civic Space TV, that is on Twitter, Civic Space TV, Facebook, and also on YouTube, and follow the hashtag Uganda Diaspora Show. Today we have it's 22 days to Kenya's presidential elections as they go to the polls on the 9th August. Now, the other day, a section of members of parliament raised concern over Kenya's general elections and how this will affect the country. But before that, we know that political power play in any country has a wide effect beyond that particular country. I want to begin with Honorable Simon Mulongo. We understand that as an East African country, when Kenya bleeds, of course, the rest of the region feels the pain.
Yes, that's very true, because we have a very close umbilical linkage between Kenya and Uganda because of our history. That East Africa, particularly the communities of Kenya and Uganda, time immemorial, have been moving between one another. Because Okay, thank you so much. I was saying that we have an umbilical relationship between Kenya and Uganda because of our history. Before colonial setting, we had the communities that are linked between South Sudan, Uganda, and Kenya. We also have some communities that settled in Kenya through Uganda, like the Mount Kenya communities, the Kisii and others. We also have some of the Luya communities who are part of the greater Hamitic communities that settled in Kenya through Uganda. And so we speak very similar dialogue. And then come the colonialists, we are linked together with the communication lines, the railway system, the road network, and we had a common colonial master. And that put us together to the extent that by the time of independence, really Uganda, Kenya, and Tanganyika, and then Tanzania later, were working together to have independence on the same day. And after that, remember in the 20s, there was an attempt by the colonialists to establish an East African federation. And this really gave rise to common currency, gave rise to common services, which got enhanced by the independent countries of East Africa until it collapsed, as you know very well, in 1977. So we are linked, and up to now, because of economic ties, having had challenges in Uganda, Uganda became the market of Kenya, and Kenya became the productive industry for Uganda. And that pulled us together much closer. Even if we have managed to grow our own local industry capacity, we still have a lot of interdependency with a greater dependency of Uganda towards Kenya. Socially, we do have also common ties. We intermarry, we do education.
Okay, I think there's perhaps a problem there. But a brief one, Honorable Simon is a team leader, AU Technical Working Group Joint Strategy Assessment on Sahel. He's a formerly Deputy Special Representative of AU to Somalia and also formerly Member of Parliament, Buvulo East in the 9th Parliament. Is equally a director, the founding director, Eastern Africa Standby Force. So I think we lost him there, but we can proceed as we try to understand how big, what big role Kenya plays in the region. Now, while we look at, if we can compare Kenya to United States, US is a global power. Kenya is an example of a small regional power, and political developments in either affect the world or their neighbors. We understand as they go to the polls, there's concerns over trade, there's concerns over, of course, now the most popular one, fuel problems that the East African region is facing. But we know trade, we know the influx of refugees in case anything goes wrong. So the worry centers around there. If I could speak to you, Edgar Muvunyi. Edgar Muvunyi Tabaro is a senior partner, KT Advocates, a representative from the East Africa and Horn of Africa Election Observers Network. While you do your work, but while we know that Kenya plays such a huge role in the regional politics at the moment, what do you see? What do you expect? And how do we move as a region? Yes, as an election observer team, as a part of the bigger East African community, we see the role Kenya plays in the community. We have worries over trade, we have worries over economic anything that might shake the economy. It's a strategic country, and it is going through a political season. What can we expect as the East African region, and how do we move?
We can't predict the future with exactitude. We can only set scenarios with many ifs and whens. If we're to take lessons from the fiasco of 2007, 2008, which in many ways caught regional players unawares, but the writing was on the wall. The protagonists in that election were from very populous ethnic communities. There were as well a very close. The pollsters of the time had put them very close. The same scenario seems to be playing out. The leading protagonists are from large ethnic groupings. They as well have very large following. And if the pollsters are going to go anything to go by, depending on what pollster you go by, it's a close call. So it could go either way, and any mismanagement of the situation could escalate and go into hostilities. However, we must also be mindful that the Republic of Kenya has more robust institutional mechanisms for handling disputes, for remedying fallouts politically. What we are having in Kenya right now, the kind of alliances, the kind of political formations we have there have not fallen from the sky. They've been very deliberate, they've been very purposeful in the way they drive the narrative, in the way they roll out their electioneering. Quite frankly, I think the Kenyans are much ahead of their East African brothers in how they handle their public affairs. Given that background, the fears around trade, Kenya is nothing without trade. The political elite there have their hands deeply in the trade, in the trade within Kenya and trade within the region. I mean, mention any of those people running for public office there. They are into export, they are into import, with distribution networks running as far as the DRC, using Uganda as an access route to those markets. So, whereas there's a bit of apprehension, I have every reason to believe that that all will be well, because there's, from what I've observed, within the government circles and the deep state, they are taking every step cautiously to avoid a recurrence of what we had in 2007 and 2008.
All right, thank you very much, Council Edgar. Miriam, when Kenya sneezes, Uganda catches a cold. For what affects Kenya directly affects Uganda and the East African region at large, as of course Honorable Simon explained earlier. Now, it is East Africa's largest economy as we speak. When it goes to the polls this year, we are considering the situation around most East African countries are, they're closely watching the space and hoping that things go right. But even if they go right, chances are there's going to be some less activity here and there. Is this supposed to affect us as a country, Uganda particularly, but also as an East African region? How can we move together as a team when Kenya is in its polls, when Uganda is having its polls, and the other countries having their polls? How do we move together? Can we pull this off together as a region?
Lynn, the good thing is that Kenya doesn't sneeze more often like other East African countries. You can imagine if it was like Uganda or Sudan that is on the coast, where every other East African country depends. Kenya has put up institutional mechanism to manage their elections. Like Edgar said, they were like one of the very few countries in the world to now a presidential elections, and nothing happened. I mean, like an uprising or whatever. That shows their resilience level. So we, as Ugandan, as other East African countries, we have that confidence that Kenya can pull off an election and things keep going as normal. But as precaution, I think East African countries should be well prepared, especially countries like Uganda who rely on Kenya for basics like fuel and other stuff, should be prepared just in case, because a little hitch in anything, we face the crisis. Unfortunately, Uganda doesn't have like a fuel storage, doesn't have like reserve. We have an alternative road in Mombasa, but it's very far and not well developed. Maybe if the Lake Victoria water transport is more developed, maybe that would be like a relief. But right now we depend on Kenya for everything, which keeps us on tenterhooks, but it shouldn't be the case. I think going forward, the Ugandans should plan to live for a few days without Kenya, which would make the economy more stable than it is now. But back to Kenyan elections, actually, it has a lot to teach us as East Africans. The way they organize politically, no crisis, there is no army everywhere, like in Uganda. They have an independent electoral commission, which so far has survived a lot of pressures, and it has stood up strong, and it's able to organize a fairly fair. If you compare with other East African countries, I think Kenya is one of them that can pull off an election that really has very few hitches and can pass as fair, free, and fair. So I think that's something to benchmark as Ugandans. And the way the government is somehow independent of the politics, like, Uhuru is going to retire this year. And nobody is scared about succession and all that stuff, the way we are feeling it in Uganda. So that shows they have gone another level as far as democracy is concerned. They can expect another president. The president is not glued on the state, like Ugandan case, Museveni says is everything, politics. Yeah, like without Museveni, we can't breathe. But the Kenyan case is like, Uhuru is going home and everything will keep on moving, and the next president is capable as any other in running a government. And it doesn't even matter whether the next president is Uhuru or Raila Odinga or Wajoka, but any president coming in, given the institutions they have, is able to lead that country. Another thing I appreciate on Kenyan elections is I don't think their political organizing and coalitions here and there are the best, but the freedom to choose the freedom to choose and the choices they give the Kenyans have like a bigger scope, and there is mobility, and it can enable them to make a real choice, a real political choice without. I mean, every other political organization, whether it's a coalition or a party, has capacity to mobilize, has capacity to campaign, and has capacity to compete with others favorably. Unlike in Uganda, where one party like NRM dominates everything, and others are just like, you know, trying to squeeze themselves in, and they don't have even access to some public facilities, including like grounds where to organize a rally. You can't even organize a rally. You need NRM to allow you to compete with them, ideally, because you need police which is under the government. I mean, police doesn't act independently. You can organize a rally and the army will stop you, and the army is directly under NRM party. So we still have our political parties are not as independent. Our democracy institutions are not as developed. Our electoral commission is so much intertwined with the government, with the current ruling party, that you don't even know whether they are independent or not. So all those things are some things which we can benchmark, and I think going forward, those are lessons we need to pick and see how we can improve our democracy. And lastly, Lynn, I want to talk about the linking. I mean, I think Simon this is a specialist in security. How did Kenya manage to unattach its army and the police from the politics? That is something I think Uganda really needs to think about a lot, since the security forces interfere so much with our democracy institutions.
Right, thank you very much, Miriam, for that. Simon, indeed, I was coming to you. You could note down what Miriam has asked. How did Kenya detach police and the army from its politics? But also, we see that in 2013, the government in Kenya enacted a series of measures designed to prevent a surge in political violence, including early warning systems that, of course, helped officials and aid groups intervene in disputes before they escalated. The result, we saw that in 2013 was far more peaceful than the case was in 2007, 2008. However, according to reports coming in, is that that was earlier, I think about 3 to 2 months ago, polls were saying that 70% of Kenyans say are worried about a repeat of the 2007 violence, because they're saying the measures that were put in place in 2013 have not been pursued for the upcoming vote. What do you have to say?
Thank you very much. I think you have, that's a good question. Yes, they did learn lessons from the previous elections, and a lot of work was put in, as you say rightly, to ensure that they forestall any repeat of the 2007-2008. But I'm afraid that there are certain factors that seem to be coming in that may likely create a replay to some degree of what happened in 2017. The first one is really the sentiments of the public. The public seem to be bent on threatening violence if things don't go their way. And this is because of the SATO and other elite actors in the background of those lead players who really are swaying this kind of thinking. And this is accompanied by the prevalence of misinformation, particularly using social media. And we see tensions beginning to rise again. And of course, you may appreciate that this time around, the adversaries of yesterday are now friends, and against the foes who were friends the other day. And this shift between those camps has its own fresh memories it brings on board, and likelihood and hopes, and also fears that are beginning to raise some tensions. We see tensions in around Tana region. We see tensions around between the Kisii area and the lower land. We see tensions mounting between and among the Luya communities because of the divisions that there are between the Kakamega group, Bungoma group, and Trans-Nzoia group led by Eugene, Wetangula in Bungoma, and Davadi on the other side. We see among the Kalenjin some elements like those who are trying to oppose Ruto in the North Rift Valley, Turkana area, and so on. And to the far south, the struggle over the voter base in Kajiado versus Kipsigis and all these. And among the Kuyus themselves or Mount Kenya communities, we have a serious divide between the elites and leading business community who seem to be on the side of Uhuru and therefore Karua and therefore opposed to Ruto, and yet underneath the youths, the women, the church leaders seem to be actually rallying in support of Kenya Kwanza. And then the same war is in Ukambani, where there's a clear divide there. Between, of course, Kalonzo on one hand, who has now gone back to the fold, and others like Mutua, who seem to be pulling to their side, and the cost seems to be the same. So it's a highly contested thing, as Edgar said. And this contestation boils down to the feelings, the emotions, down to the communities. So that even if there are those measures, there's no guarantee that it may not erupt again. And also given that the schemas of violence seems to be because of the close tie in terms of victory, seems to be to want to employ other means to ensure that they subdue the opponent. So I see that having most likely some challenges, and we hope the security apparatus will do much more than what it is. Back to Miriam, who's dressed very well today. I like her colors. The issue is the Kenyan security forces, whereas they suffered some setback in 1964 in terms of insurrection that happened in East Africa, the colonial legacy sustained, where the military remain a subject of the state and not of government, and they separate the two quite clearly. And that has remained a doctrine in the Kenyan Armed Forces for a long time. In 2007, I remember some comment were made by one of the East African regional leaders who said that where things have reached, I think the military should consider taking over. But that was played down. And I remember General Kianga, who was in charge then, played down those kind of things. And he assured the country that the military would never take over power, that whatever is happening is purely civil matter, and political leaders and the institutions, civil institutions should take charge of the situation. So to me, just to answer your question, you say that yes, Edgar's comment echoed challenges but hope. But I think we should look at this very cautiously, that anything can happen, and there's need to put a proper stethoscope to the pulse where there could likely be an explosive situation. In fact, as we speak, some central communities have begun shifting and moving away from Rift Valley to take refuge in Central. And that's not a very good sign at all. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Honorable, for that. And I like that you open our eyes to exactly what's going on ground, because not many people know what exactly is going on in these different areas, especially Tana, Kisii, the Luo land, and the worries that come with all these movements. Now, Edgar, Council Edgar, the Ugandan human rights lawyer, Nicholas Opio, the other day was speaking to the East African, and he said that besides the disruption of the import lifeline, the second biggest concern is that if the elections turn violent, it would trigger an influx of Kenyan refugees into the country, where some of those who fled the country in 2007 still reside. This means we are putting pressure on Ugandan economy at a time Uganda is taking care of many refugees from South Sudan, Burundi, Congo, and Rwanda. You say right now is hard for us to predict what the outcome could look like. But I think as Honorable Simon says, we ought to be prepared. In the event things go right, how do we move, or how do we proceed? Or in the event things go wrong, how prepared is Uganda for especially that the influx of refugees?
Uganda is no stranger to hosting refugees. Our head of state likes to pontificate with pride that Uganda has probably the most liberal refugee policy in the world. We're host to about 1 million South Sudanese refugees, maybe about a quarter of that from the DRC. We host many refugees from Rwanda. We host many refugees from Burundi. We also host refugees. People were forcefully refugees, not necessarily in relation to politics gone bad or gone wrong, but we as well host persons who were forced to migrate from the Karagwe and Kagera areas of northern Tanzania. They were evicted, I think, during the time of Jakaya Kikwete. So Uganda is and indeed 2007, 2008, there are about, I think, 10,000 refugees who came from Kenya, 10 or 12,000. Some returned, but 4,000 of them refused to return to Kenya, and they were relocated to Kiriandongo. Ugandans themselves are not strangers to being refugees, although that seems to have been checked, forestalled. The influx of Ugandans going into exile, I mean, the numbers are not that pronounced, and those who are in exile are styled self-exiled. So in that regard, Uganda is no stranger to receiving refugees, and the policy of government, and if you look at our budgeting in Uganda, we always give estimates and always give provision for receiving refugees. Now, frankly speaking, Uganda does not have that capacity, does not have the resources, and not just the physical resources, but also the ecology of an influx, sudden influx of refugees from another country. Because many of these refugees who come are mainly in subsistence. When they come here, they put a strain on our resources, on the water, on the land, on other environmental aspects like tree cover and what have you. So in that regard, the strain will be very, 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 very pronounced. However, on this occasion, our institutional mechanisms, the East African community is more robust than it was in 2007. The International Conference on the Great Lakes region is as well robust. IGAD too is robust. So I quite frankly, the kind of apprehension that we had 15 years ago does not seem to be as it is now. But Comrade Mulongo has spoken about the internal tensions and fault lines, and is mentioned rightly so, Tana River area, Ukambani. Now, those are internal, and it's for the Kenyans to manage. However, when things go terribly bad, the trade routes can be disrupted. And it's been the case. I remember in 1991, when we were having elections, the first multi-party elections in Kenya, President Moi closed the border. He did the same thing in 1997. He closed the border with Uganda, and it disrupted whatever flow of trade. Miriam talked about the alternative route through Dar es Salaam. Incidentally, Dar es Salaam port is much more efficient than Mombasa port. It's only that the distance between Dar es Salaam and Mutukura is very long, but the Tanzanians are not in bed, are not sleeping. They've done their standard gauge railway up to Mwanza, Port Mwanza on Lake Victoria, and you know, with the rail and water, it's only that our vessels are yet to be modernized. Our vessels are still run by the Uganda Railways Corporation, and they are yet to be modernized. But if you have the water transport and the rail the upgraded rail in Tanzania functioning together, believe me, would be able to move bigger volumes, and coupled with the efficiency of Dar es Salaam port, it might even be a better alternative to use than the Mombasa one. So not all hope is lost.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Edgar, for that. Sarah Bireete, a very good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Sarah Bireete joins us as a chairperson at the East African Horn Election Observer, I beg your pardon, network. Sarah, thank you for joining us. Now, historians say that the history of the region is that those who consider themselves as elders always want to influence whoever comes to power in the neighboring countries, especially among the three initial EAC states, that is Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. How is this going to affect the future of the East African community?
So briefly about the Eastern Horn of Africa Election Observer Network that is hosted by the ELOG, the Elections Observer Network of Kenya. We are on the ground in Kenya. We followed up the audit of the electoral register. We followed up the verification of candidates. We've been following up the electoral laws that finally Parliament and court pushed back on campaign financing. We had the backlash on that. We followed up on the media coverage of candidates where candidate Ruto had a complaint. And we are now following up with the court process where the High Court has declared that some of the candidates that have not been nominated yet and have not been gazetted should be nominated, gazetted, and put on the ballot. Yet the ballot printing process has ended. But that is briefly to bring listeners to the speed as to what is happening in the Kenyan elections. But as to the big brother in the neighbor influencing the Kenyan elections, I wish to highlight that there is a lot of freedom of expression in Kenyan elections, unlike Uganda and the other East African member states. If you compare with the Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Tanzania, there is shrinking civic space and freedom of expression during elections is limited and highly controlled by the authoritarian regimes that are emerging. In Tanzania, we have an emerging authoritarian regime. In Uganda, we have a confirmed authoritarian regime. And in Rwanda, Rwanda now falls behind when it comes to freedom of expression in terms of elections and civic engagements. Because in Rwanda, at every election, I think we have an opposition candidate arrested and they stay for another 3 to 5 years in prison for having thought about taking power in that country. So it's doing badly in that area. So we are observing this election closely. Can the neighbors influence it? No. Even the current incumbent who is supporting the Azimio Kenya Kwanza candidate is struggling with influencing the outcome of that election. So the Kenyans have asserted themselves in terms of civic engagement, and you can only disrupt them with violence, but not big brother influence. So there is no chance in my view. The neighbors can try to participate like Uganda supports Ruto. But I'm telling you the chance of that trickling down to a Kenyan voter who is highly informed, who has freedom to get their vote, it is as remote as nothing. They can only give money and maybe troops to cause violence in Kenya, but they cannot influence the choice as to how Kenyans will vote. They cannot do that.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Sarah there. Miriam, we have seen that Ugandan legislators recently were in parliament and they were discussing the impact of the polls, the Kenyan polls might have on the country. They're also calling on the president to assure the country that there are plans to secure especially its imports. They warned that Uganda could face further fuel price increases in the post-election period. One, they've been considering an alternative route, that is a Tanga port for oil and petroleum related products. South Sudan is considering using the Djibouti side. What should we expect in terms of all this? Because there's worry across the community.
Of course, worry is justified given the character of African elections. You never know what happens the following day, but like previous speakers have said, there is less chance that Kenyan elections might be violent or might, at least so far what's going on, they are a few days away from voting and nothing, scary is happening. So we highly expect that they're gonna be peaceful, and even if there are some issues, they won't be too much to disrupt the trade and the business going on. But I think the Ugandan parliament shouldn't stop at getting worried and pushing the president. The parliament has power to enact laws and put measures to control such emergencies. So far, the Uganda fuel emergency is a bigger thing beyond the Kenyan election. Every other incident, even if it's a big accident or like a flood happening and disrupting the Kenyan route, it hampers our fuel prices dramatically, which is something that we should prevent. We should be having shock absorbers in how we are so dependent on Kenyan transportation and the port and that system. But like Edgar explained, the alternative route is as good. But my worry is, and maybe a question all of us should ponder, why is Uganda not connecting the standard gauge railway line the same way other East African parties have done? Even if they are to maintain what we have today, the rail system in Uganda, the Uganda rail, is so far not so developed. As a landlocked country, surely we should be putting our resources to such a infrastructure, because we are so dependent on importations, we are so dependent on East African coast, yet we don't have a permanent route apart from the road network that could transport goods so easily, or in case of a crisis that we could depend on. And that has affected our trade. It even hampers the trade, the normal trade that is going on. It's very expensive for Ugandan traders to trade with other East African partners because the transportation infrastructure is not as good as it should be. Yet we have capacity to make it better. So far we are building roads going to DRC. Why don't we think about improving our rail network so that we can connect? Yeah, of course, there is the alternative, the Hoima routes and all that, but so far it's in the works, nothing so far. It looks like a long-term project than the immediate, but the rail would help a lot, especially the traders who trade in agricultural products. The rail network would bring things from up country and take them across East African region as easily as it should be. And talking about other East African partners, of course, the challenge for Uganda is so clear, but if you think about other countries like Sudan and DRC who are far off, and then there is Rwanda, Burundi, I mean, the East African countries, they are so, I think we are the least developed region in Africa when you look at the infrastructure, and that's a cause for worry. We need a more advanced rail network because we have so many landlocked countries, but even the few water systems that we have, like the Lake Victoria, are not utilized for transportation. They could be, imagine the trade that would develop around Lake Victoria if Lake Victoria was water transportation system was well developed, because it covers all East African region naturally. Then it's close to Rwanda, it's close to Burundi. So that would be an easier route to all these countries, and it could ease the pressure on the road network that so far we are using.
All right, thank you very much, Miriam. Honorable Simon, the interconnectivity of East African people, the commerce, trade, makes any attempt to politically or commercially disrupt livelihoods of the community countries so untenable in this modern day and era. What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, I think, as you said and we said before, this is a foundation for closed linkages. And it would be actually an easy way of integration, but at a higher level, which, of course, as you know, is an ongoing exercise. The elites continue to be a problem to integration of communities, of economies, and so on and so forth because of self-interests. Even the issue of road network vis-a-vis using the waterways and the rail lines is about political economy. And what we almost went to war in 1980s with Kenya in Busia, we exchanged some rounds of ammunition. It was simply because of the argument by Uganda that we insist on using the rail line and not promote the road, which has higher costs. And therefore, it makes the cost of entrepreneurship in a region or sub-regions much more expensive. But I think the issue is the elites who are really an issue. They instrumentalize their communities for different purposes and not for integration. So I see the issue of our linkages socially and economically using cross-border communities being a backbone to greater integration between us and the ARICC, between us and Sudan, South Sudan, Kenya, and Rwanda, and so on. As you could see, when President Museveni went to Kigali recently, you could see how the community responded. Now you wonder, really, is this the same relation that we saw the other day? How come that the people react and act a little differently? So I think the point you're raising, Madam Moderator, is that yes, we could use our communities, our ethno multicentricism as a way of balancing out greater interests, again, national interests and so on. But just allow me to touch the point that raised by some other colleagues about the question raised about support from the diaspora, from other power brokers or players in the region, and which could actually be much more than just that. I know that, yes, that both principals in Kenya have close linkages in Uganda, and both have some business interests in Uganda, and vice versa. Yes, there are some people who interpreted that to mean that because one did not want the other to continue having close alliance, that it meant that the other is supporting the other. I've heard this a lot, but I can also tell you for free that I'm aware that a lot of dialogue has gone on between the two principals in Uganda and Kenya to ensure that that one is played away with. And that's what's happening. The Kenyans definitely have a greater muscle on their own elections. But where the external influence comes in is where the swaying of that tip at the end of the game plan. For example, if there is the call is too close, there could be factors from external areas that can sway the final play. And I know that can happen. It happens from the region, but also it can happen from the greater region, where we have some superpowers that are interested in the geopolitics of Kenya could also weigh in. Don't forget, the Western countries are watching. They use multilateral, multinational companies. They use other political leverages and so on to tilt the balance at the tip. But if the difference is clear from the beginning, then external interference can actually be downplayed. So I agree that I don't want to say that it cannot happen. It can happen very, very well, and there are many ways and means of doing that. Thank you. Back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Edgar, I come to you. We're looking at Kenya. First of all, is a model country in terms of democracy, and every time there's elections going on, the entire region is really watching and looking at how everything is going to, play out. So the question here is, how will the relations of these different, the entire community, how would they change in case either the leading presidential candidate wins, when the two especially, because we see that the races between the two, that is Raila Odinga and of course the deputy president William Ruto, how are we going to see that affect the relations of the entire community? Because we, like I said, Kenya is a model country in terms of democracy for the community.
Let me start with the last point, that Kenya is a model of democracy in the community. I would even dare say for the whole of the African continent, and maybe even the world, because South America, Asia have been through, and some countries in Europe still grappling with things that Kenya has really put behind. And this has not happened by accident, like I submitted earlier. They have been purposeful, they've been deliberate. And I'll start with the incumbent. I want to give history to this and see why Kenya has taken the tangent it has taken, and the rest of the region is still grappling even with the very basics. President Uhuru Kenyatta in 2002 presented himself. Now let's start around 1991. He presented himself as a candidate for Gatundu South. He presented himself on the KANU ticket. He was rejected resoundingly because KANU was not popular in Mount Kenya area. He differed with joining Kibaki, and the Moi family brought him back on board and made him, I think, he was on the University Council of Egerton University, then later appointed Minister for local government and anointed to replace Moi as president. Everything was going his way because he was supported by an incumbent then and the so-called deep state then. But the Kenyans rejected him at the polls. And there was an attempt by Ruto, William Ruto, who at that time was transitioning from a youth to middle age and had led a group, the YK 91. William Ruto, there was Cyrus Jirongo, there was another guy called Julius Sunkuli. At that time, I think he was minister for the interior. They attempted a court process and counter processes to counter, or rather to subvert the will of the people. Uhuru Kenyatta came out and said, no, the people have spoken resoundingly. They have rejected us at the poll. The president-elect is Kibaki. He went to Norfolk Hotel at the stairs, called a press conference, and read a prepared speech where he was congratulating the president-elect Kibaki. Now, it takes more than courage. It takes more than character to do that. Mind you, powerful forces around him who were standing directly behind him at that press conference wanted to subvert the will of the Kenyans. The same Uhuru Kenyatta has made it very clear, come August, he's stepping out of the role of the president and handing over to the president that the Kenyans will have elected. Now, how did even that happen? There were consistent and persistent efforts, struggles by the Kenyan civil society to deliver what they call the second liberation. Multi-party democracy in Kenya did not fall from the sky. People paid with their freedom, people paid with their blood. And we are talking of professionals who led these processes. We are talking of businessmen. We are talking of late Ken Matiba. We are talking of Martin Shikuku. We are talking of, you would see there was a consistent and concerted effort across the political divide, rather across the ethnic divide, across the economic divide to better Kenya. And that's what has been placated and is informing the processes that we have now. In the 90s, or rather 2000, Kenya came to Uganda to understudy its judicial reforms. The Kenya Constitution was hired Ugandan experts, Professor Sempevo, to inform their processes. But they've moved much ahead of us. One, because they've created very strong institutions. They've created institutions that will withstand or be able to outlive the persons who are holding them. Now, those are very, very critical lessons to pick from Kenya. 20 years ago, Kenya was ranked as a peer with many African countries, but it's gone past them. It's gone past them. And like I said, this has not fallen from the sky. They've been consistent. Its leadership, its political class, its economic class, its elite have been consistent in driving to build a Kenya that works, a Kenya that is sustainable. So what lessons do the rest of us pick from that? There's nothing new under the sky. You are not going to reinvent the wheel. We should simply pick from them and implement. That's my submission.
Interesting. We should pick from them and implement. As such, is very simple to say, very hard to actualize. But
no, it can't be hard. It can't be hard, Lynn. We have Sarah Bireete.
How many times, Edgar, if you allow me, how many times have we seen Kenyan elections organized as they have been? The way you have painted a history picture, it has been like that for them. But look at the rest of the East African community. There is always problems with democracy when it comes to the elections. And here you are saying we should pick. How many times are we going to pick, watch, and just move on as if we saw nothing?
Do you think the Kenyans just sat back and folded their hands? They fought back. They fought back. Mm-hmm. They fought back. There are many heroes. Martha Karua. We're talking about Martha Karua is one of the heroes of that struggle. Yeah? Martha Karua is one of the heroes of that struggle.
That's right.
Raila Odinga served 8.5 years under solitary confinement. It's not that he didn't have things to do.
Mm.
So, I mean, guys, we gotta wake up. We gotta wake up from our slumber.
Yes, indeed, we're trying to wake up. Now, Dr. Sarah, if you're still with us, as an election observer, we note and appreciate that there will be either positive or negative ramifications in the shaping of regional integration of the future of the East African community with whatever outcome from this election. How do you see this playing out?
Lynn, I want to first speak on Edgar's point of picking lessons from Kenya. The 2007 post-election violence in Kenya cannot discount the efforts and achievements, democratic achievements of Kenya as a nation. And if you look at the key elements of nation building, as an ID with the because of Swahili, especially some of us like myself who are struggling to learn Swahili, having studied it for 1 year and forgot because of lack of practice, but I'm now determined not to forget again. So they have
you're not alone.
Well, so the second element of nation building is the common good. When Chivachi introduced the element of an economy that works, you would find testimonies, even with the drivers, cleaners at the airport, telling you that the Kenyan economy is working for everybody. It doesn't matter what you were doing, but they had an economy working for everybody in all sectors of their economy. So the element of a common good with services, Kenya is on record in the first 6 months of COVID. They built and launched a COVID specialized hospital. When we were here struggling, they purchased vaccines. When all the vaccines we have in Uganda are mere donations, we were not even able to purchase a single consignment. So you have these elements of a nation, but they have challenges. The same way we see Britain has challenges, we see America has challenges with the January 6th attack, but they have progress they've made that the region should copy from them. So when it comes to indicators for electoral violence, will there be violence or not in Kenya? In from 205 and 206, the APRM report predicted the Kenyan electoral violence, and it's documented in their report. But nobody paid attention to the APRM report. So as countries in the region, we do not pay attention to our early warning mechanisms. We do not pay attention to documentation that is done on democratization processes. And that's how an opportunity to stop that unfortunate event failed. Yet the APRM Secretariat was very clear and spot potential building over time that led to the Kenyan post-election violence. But in this election, really the indicators of violence are limited. We are documenting. There has been one rally, I think I've forgotten the region where the supporters of Ruto and those of Raila clashed, but the rally was for governors. The name has just skipped the name of the constituency has just skipped my mind. But there has been one rally where there was violence, clash, but it was also stopped. It was not bloody, and no lives were lost. As to whether there could be electoral violence in this election, it will be limited. I don't know whether Lynn have answered the second part of your question.
You haven't answered the second part where I asked that will the outcome of either from whoever comes through, are there ramifications in shaping the regional integration of the future of the East African community?
No, I think regardless of whoever wins, Kenya as a nation will unite, and they should be able to carry on. They are the current chair of the East African community. And I think the new president will still find that chairmanship running and will inherit it from Uhuru. I look at Kenyans, I hope the parties will accept defeat, even when they don't accept the outcome of court, because I know there are already complaints, including the people printing registers on whether there's one party that is connected already. There are complaints on whether there will be a manual script at the register at the polling centers for verification. So I hope that the parties will accept the outcome of that process because it's largely transparent. But even when they don't, Kenya has a tested mechanism for adjudicating presidential elections. And I think it was the first country in East Africa to overturn a presidential election. So even when they don't accept the outcome, they will be able to go to court. The judiciary is ready, and they are all united, and they think they will uphold the choice of Kenyans that who should govern them. I hope that at that level, they will then accept the verdict of court and move on so that they are able to steer the East African integration for which they will be still chairing to its next stride.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Doctor, for that. Over to you, Honorable Simon. We realize that there are emerging trends of alliances in this Kenyan election. We have a new generation of leaders versus the original East African community agenda. They all have different political agendas. How are these all combined going to play out for especially the East African community?
Yeah, first of all, I want to go back to the issue of democracy. Kenya being the best model democracy in East Africa and perhaps the whole world. I think you agree with me, Madam Moderator, that it is very hard to nail that to any land audience because the parameters alone are very difficult. What parameters are we using to say this is the best? Statistica, one of these organizations that carry out assessment of democracy in most parts of the world, actually rank Mauritius as the most democratic, and they have their own issues. They look at things like pluralism, participation, government functioning, institutions, civil liberties, and all these. But are these the ones that actually inform democracy? Because if you use the same to test America, you may find that America is far down. But some people say, no, the American democracy is the best in the whole world. and so will be the UK and others. So I think it is, unless somebody justifies the parameters, I may not agree to that. As we speak today, there is no position in Kenya, for example, so to say. And democracy works if there are checks and balances, and so on and so forth. So I think, yes, there is some degree of growth in terms of a democratic path in Kenya. There are different forms of democracy. There are areas of strength, but also areas of weaknesses, and we need to admit to those. But back to your question, I see, first of all, if I can tilt your question, the personalities at play and whether they can foster the East African Federation processes. I find that the way these things stand now, the Azimio leader has had a lot of issues in terms of relationship with some neighboring countries. I just hope that with this personality, where he has had a clash, had issues here and there, that if he wins elections, he will be able to propel the same. And it is that personality that can make people support or tilt the balance of events towards the final aspect of elections. I also see that Kenya Kwanza leaders had a lot of inroads in the region. As there are likelihoods that you could perhaps foster greater and fast track the federation if he continued with the current posture of character in himself. Kenya, of course, will try to maintain a stronghold on economic advantage over the rest by trying to pull strings in their favor. Because as you may realize, that even when we're grouped on the list of economic products to be exempt from taxes, Kenya has not actually played ball evenly in that. For example, they deny certain products from Uganda to go to Kenya, and yet for us, we more or less allow almost everything to come from Kenya to Uganda. We're more liberal compared to Kenya. You don't just get anything from Uganda to Kenya, including Uganda waragi. You don't just find it there. And yet we have everything that comes from Kenya, from alcohols, wines and spirits, and all these things coming in here. Recently, we had a war over poultry products and all this. Why should we have this kind of wars? So Kenya will try to continue to maintain that. But unless they also open up, it's going to be quite difficult. Looking at Tanzania being a frontier country for the SADC and also trying to fight for herself to re-emerge. In fact, I forgot to mention that democratically, Tanzania has been rated higher despite some areas of infringement on some civil liberties here and there. But they are ranked very, very high. But on the economic front, yes, Tanzania is a struggling one. They want to restate her position as freedom fighters, but also economic power in the region. And they're doing that to compete with other sub-regional players like Ethiopia, who also eye Kenya, and so on. Now, to me, whoever comes in Kenya, these have been players before. They've been part of the processes that are happening now in the EAC. Are they likely to change anything? They may do some subtle things like slowing down certain aspects as long as they don't favor them. But to say they may affect it tragically, I do not think, because they've been part and parcel of the processes of the East African Federation activities. Back to you.
Right, thank you very much, Honorable. But before you go away, I want to let's talk about the regional policy, because we're seeing that the East African community is rooting for a federation. Most of them, it is still a hassle, still a conversation they're having for them to be a one community. But we also understand that Kenya plays a pivotal role, especially when it comes to paying their dues. So there is, in a way, sway this policy. Will we have a generation of new leaders when we look at the current deputy president, who is also in the race, William Ruto. We have Raila Odinga, as much as he has been in the fight here and there, that we have a new generation coming in from the other different areas. Let's talk about this regional policy. How will this influence, how will Kenya's pivotal role influence regional policy?
Well, your assumption is that we have a new generation. I'm not saying it.
A little bit. There's some sense of new.
I mean, was they elected or not, of course, young people are catching up and overtaking the older communities, I mean, the older players. But I see in Kenyan politics the sustained family politics of the founding fathers that continue to sustain up to now. Dr. William Samoei Ruto represents a shift in that. And we see the support to him coming from mainly the youths, the young people, the lower echelons of the society, who seem to be protesting against the old system. And as you say, maybe that's where you have a point, say that of the shift from in terms of age brackets is something unstoppable. And by the way, we may have to reorient our policies to really address the young people, because they form over almost 80% of our population. They're the ones who are most jobless. They're the ones who are most educated. They're the ones who are most current, and so on. And our policy seems to be stagnating in the old past, where we want to look in the past, embrace the past, continue with the past, and translate the past to look like it's current, but it's not. So I agree with you that yes, there is a shift, but I hope deliberately in our countries we'll do that to address the young people who are actually the immediate tomorrow owners of our country's leadership. Now, to the East African, yes, Kenya will try to hold state firstly, because of their national interests, because of what they think is a historical role to play, because of the advantage they have in terms of economics. Of course, population-wise, there are those who beat Kenya in population, but definitely their population is much bigger than what a number of countries. But that can only sustain if the other countries like DRC and South Sudan will continue in their challenges of securitization and stabilization. If South Sudan stabilized, and if DRC is stabilized, in the next 25 years, there will be a huge shift from Kenya to those two countries. DRC itself is a superpower. As my professor told me one time, DRC is equal to Western Europe minus infrastructure. The size, the watts, the resource space, it supersedes even Western Europe. If DRC woke up today, it's a sleeping giant, and same applies to South Sudan. The other one is Somalia, who are really opting to come over, but they still have some challenges, and I believe they will sort them out with the time. So Kenya, yes, will continue to dominate, but that to me, as we go by and with time, it will have to subside. Back to you.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Simon, for that. Miriam, we are looking at these elections and hoping to pick lessons. Edgar already hinted on this and said that we ought to pick and implement. I think we still have a long way to do that, if I'm correct, because at least there's a lot that they do that other countries in the community don't do. Now, while we look at lessons we can pick as a country, you already hinted on us looking at especially detaching military police from politics and especially the elections. But what else can we learn as a country? What else can the East African community countries pick from the elections going on in Kenya?
Most panelists have mentioned so far the transfer of power, but I think something to observe and not learn maybe is how power is concentrated in a few hands, in a few families in Kenya since independence. I think that's unfair and a deterrent to democracy. There should be like a varied choice, and before we see mobility of power into different hands and classes of Kenyans, I think so far they still have a long way to go. Because right now their power is like within 2-3 families. I mean, Ruto is a disruption, but not so much. The power makers are just a couple of families on top, and nothing has changed as far as that is concerned. And it has bred corruption, even compromises, even in politics, the way they use the money in determining some political posts and all that, influencing the political decisions. That is something we need to avoid or just learn not to do, because we are already doing it. I mean, it's something we all have to work on and ensure that democracy has like a free flow and give a chance to all Kenyans to participate in politics, all classes of people, all different tribes. Kenya has a tribal issue, which is also a SOI. So all those things are something we can look at and learn to avoid. But Kenya so far is doing so well as a work in progress. Another lesson, Lynn, I want to highlight, I think this also goes to Dr. Sarah Bireete as an election monitoring boss in the region. The way that Kenya is facilitating the diaspora community to vote. This would be the first time the Kenyan diaspora is participating in elections. But so far, there are so many challenges. The registration was supposed to happen in 2021, and the COVID lockdown affected the processes. So Uganda's constitution ruled that the Ugandan diaspora and community should be participating in 2026 elections. But so far, we have not enacted the laws to operationalize that. In 2020, the EC boss said they are preparing themselves to register Ugandans in diaspora and they participate in election 2006, but nothing on ground. The parliament has to enact the operationalizing law to that, and nobody has moved the law yet. Yet we have like 3 or 4 years to reach there. As we know how Uganda works, we know that's not a lot of time. And another challenge is, given the Kenyan resources in their embassies, Lynn, we've been discussing how Ugandan embassies are under-facilitated. Now, given the Kenyan embassies, the way they are facilitated, they are having a very big challenge in registering the Kenyan diaspora community to participate in voting. So how challenging will it be a Ugandan case? And what lessons are we picking from that process? Kenyan election is highly digitized. Like they have a lot of, most of their staff is, I think their e-register is much better than our Ugandan. They have resources as far as money is concerned. They have the identification system and registration of their citizens is higher than our Ugandan numbers. So when you look at, so far they are not even able to get a few thousands to vote, and so far out of 54 countries, they are this, I think they picked like 12 countries to be voting, to act as voting centers, but even logistically that is impossible, because like in Europe, they have one center, which is like 2 centers, Germany and UK. But there are so many countries in Europe that citizens can't move. You can't cross like 3 borders to go and register in Germany. And given the days of registration, which we are like 15. So Sarah, I don't know if your organization is looking at the diaspora registration and participation in Kenyan elections, and what lessons we can pick from there, since we are also headed the same way, and how is Uganda prepared to do that come 2026? On the side of the East African politics, I think as East Africans, we should be looking at Kenya and thinking about our leaders. An example here is Museveni and Kagame. Recently, Kagame made a pronouncement that he's ready to run for the next 20 years. That will make him like 45 years in power. And talking about Museveni, he has not indicated that he's ready to retire. So far, he has ruled Uganda for the other 40 years, almost. So the challenge is, when are we building democracies where we can see peaceful transfer of power as Kenyan has? When are we going to see a democratic succession of leaders? When are we going to see have hope, you know, where we can have peaceful political transition and get used to that. Because so far Uganda now is labeled a politically fragile country because it has everybody suspicious. How will power be transferred from seven to the next leader? Are we going to see a coup? Are we going to see an election where he freely hands over power? Because he has never indicated anywhere that he's ready to hand over power. The same applies to Kagame, and all those leaders are influential in East African community. So as East African community members, we really have a long way to go as far as politics is concerned. And maybe if we can pick it from Kenya, we can go a long way towards democratization.
All right, thank you very much, Miriam. Dr. Sarah, as we look for lessons to pick from Kenya politics and Kenya democracy, Miriam highlights something very key. The e-register, the other day, I think earlier this week, the IEBC was under attack for the e-register. They're saying it has issues. People are not ready for the e-register. They would rather have the manual register, and perhaps alongside the e-register. So I think we as a community still have a long way in going very digital with everything that we do. However, Dr. Sarah, what do we pick as an election observer? Certainly you have seen what happens in the other different countries. What do we pick for Uganda as we look forward to 2026? Democracy-wise, operation-wise, how do we get the army and the police out of politics and the rest?
You know, I have posted on some group that I wish the Electoral Commission of Uganda could be facilitated to go and be stationed in Kenya for the next 3 weeks. And I wish our leaders are watching what is happening in Kenya. There are massive rallies. There is no police to interfere with the people's participation in elections. There is no army. There is nobody using security forces to try to disrupt or hijack the will of the people in Kenya. If Uhuru, even if President Museveni was stepping down in Uganda like Uhuru is, I'm sure he would deploy his army, which he uses more or less as a personal militia during elections, unfortunately. And it is very unfortunate, and I've said this on several times, that we have a highly educated army, very highly educated, very qualified and competent as an army. But it has been abused and reduced to a militia aimed at keeping one individual in power. Very, very unfortunate. So I'm sure our army cannot play the role that Kenya is playing. In addition, Lynn, it's important for our viewers to recall that even at the height of post-election violence, the army played a neutral role and was able to meet people, negotiate, and end massive killings. But our army never keeps in the barracks. Our army is on the streets. I'm sorry about the background noise. I thought I should try to withdraw from engagements with the children and then try to leave the school. So I'm sorry to our listeners. So we have an army that keeps on the streets as compared to keeping in the barracks. Very unfortunate. A professional army should concentrate on securing the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ugandans. But our army does police work. It even does more policing than the police itself in Uganda. And then to make matters worse, the fusion between the police and the army, very unfortunate. So in terms of the roadmap for nation building, I know that President Museveni has done many things good, other things he has failed. But when we thought he had built a professional army and he would deliver that as a state institution to protect the sovereignty of Uganda, he has squandered that. We now have a militia, aimed at protecting Museveni's longevity in power and his family, if in case anybody has wishes to take over political power. Very, very unfortunate. At the end of the day, we shall have no professional army to speak of. So when you compare with Kenya, it is a direct contrast. The behavior of Kenyan Defense Forces, the behavior of Kenyan police, the non-political actions, it is a direct contrast with Uganda. And no wonder Kenyans laugh at us whenever we tell them that our president has ambitions of leading the first East Africa. They ask which East Africa can he lead? That tribal chief. He has reduced himself to that level, unfortunately. So I hope the Ugandan electoral agents and the security forces are watching and can help us recover our democratization process as a country.
Dr. Sarah, before I let you go, do you have hope? Can we as a country have hope that we can achieve this at some point?
We lost hope when it comes to Project Uganda. That's why some of us are not tired of speaking. I am sure that as a nation, we shall reach a time and recollect ourselves and weave the web that should knit us together as a country and move forward. I've not lost hope on Uganda.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Right. Edgar, are you still with, before I get to Edgar rather, Honorable Simon, you've heard from Miriam, you've heard from Dr. Sarah, and clearly there's worry that the East African community still lacks in terms of democracy. Uganda has been dubbed politically fragile. We're hearing what's coming in from Rwanda as they head to the polls in about 2 years' time. Tanzania is also there. We have DRC that has a huge burden of conflicts in and out. We have South Sudan that has never stabilized at all since it gained independence. Now, all eyes are on Kenya. Is there going to be a time? What lessons, first of all, do we pick from Kenya? What lessons do we need as the East African community to especially stand out as a community, but also as individual nations?
Thank you so much, Lynn. There are always lessons to learn. Even from a person you regard stupid, you can pick a lesson. And by the lessons, we mean both positive and negative. And there is no doubt that there's a huge host of lessons we can pick from Kenya. The first one is that Kenya has struggled. Kenya has moved from being an ultra-autocratic country from the time of Kenyatta to through Moi to the political reforms, pluralism in 1992. And up to the current one, when we see there are some evolutions that that characterize the current political dispensation. So we learned that yes, you can move from autocracy to democracy as it's understood by a number of people. Secondly, that you can have independence of security agencies to a very high degree. Though, of course, this independence should also be seen to be limited to not interfering, but they must be active. Just 2 days ago, the civil society groups held a press conference and denounced the docility of this of security agencies in Kenya, that they're just docile, they're not doing anything, that they faulted the rollout of the electoral security management plan, which is supposed to use to train regional and county and sub-county police commanders into this. They're rolling out in a very snailish manner. It's like it's a deliberate thing to cash on it for other purposes. They also faulted the transfer of senior officers just recently, as if they're trying to stage manage issues as they come to elections. So I cannot say that the Kenyan security services are totally independent, because we're seeing moves of certain security services into the electoral activities, albeit, of course, in a clandestine manner. So but the lesson we learn here is that most of them are not overt security services. You can have people in plain clothes, armed security personnel, actually outnumbering some rally people, but you may think they're just civilians, but they're not necessarily are. And I know Kenya Intelligence Services, the NSIS plus the police, have been deploying both uniformed and non-uniformed to ensure that there is stability. There's the instances where they say the police have acted in high-handedness in certain instances. I think it happened somewhere in Kisumu, it happened somewhere in Nyeri recently, in which the police were blamed for being high-handed in their work. But I agree with Sarah, my good friend Sarah, that you don't see overly security apparatus being swung in full way compared to Uganda. But as a security analyst, I would say that deployment of security agencies depends on the nature of the threats. If the threats, for example, Kenya is being threatened by Al-Shabaab, I can give you this information. Al-Shabaab have announced between the rank and file to disrupt the Kenyan elections. They want to deploy the targeted area in Nairobi and Mombasa areas. We don't know exactly where they're likely to cause mayhem, but they're planning to disrupt elections. Now, if it's Al-Shabaab doing that, and you know they're going to deploy and employ their military or pseudo-military, improvised military equipment or tools, then you have to deploy military, because the military who can counter that. You cannot take administration police in Kenya to counter a high-level military equipment that have been deployed by Al-Shabaab. You have to deploy the military. So I think it depends on the threat level. Secondly, it depends on the numbers of the police. The ratio of police to the people in Uganda is in thousands, yet they're supposed to be 1 to 400. That's not there. You have about barely 42,000 policemen in Uganda, and you have 48 million people, and we're talking about over 20-something thousand million voters. So how do you deploy police? They're not adequate. And that's why they end up even recruiting some constabularies to fill the gap. So the military come in because of that. And also the military come in when they weigh the situation in a manner that they deem it necessary. Now, the issue here should be not why should the military and police be there. The issue is what are they doing there and what problems are they causing in the electoral processes. I know members may want to enumerate a number of these, but to me, if the military come there to keep peace, if the police come there to keep peace, and they're not disrupting somebody going to vote, I will have no problem with that. I know some areas where some military have misbehaved or police have misbehaved and so on, favoring certain agents, but that must be condemned. It's the wrong thing. Keep security, allow us to vote freely, and that's the issue. So back to Kenya, I see the security agencies requiring to fasten their belts to ensure that they have high intelligence response measures. Sometimes they have managed to make a very good security management plan, but they don't seem to respond to it with the requisite rapid reaction measures. When something happens like happened in 2007, it took so long for security personnel to even come in, and the people died a lot in Kenya and so on. So
Honorable Simon, I see Sarah has her hand up. Sarah, please, go on.
Yes, Sarah, come in. I hope she will not Ugandan the argument.
I actually want to give information that in our case, the military intervenes to beat people, to beat journalists, to disorganize opposition rallies, and there is no such thing like a terrorist threat, especially going by the 2021 elections. But for Kenya, if there is a terror threat, of course the military should take position and deal with it. That's their sovereign duty, and there is no question about that. But even dealing with a terror threat does not mean interfering with people's civic rights and civic engagements.
All right. Thank you very much, Sarah, for that.
The point I was just making.
Yes, go on.
Yes, the point I was making simple is that the presence of military and police in the electoral process, particularly polling, should not be mixed with interference. And some people would tend to say, there are too many soldiers in a place, but what did they exactly do is the question. And I said that it's also a fact that some isolated instance where some uniformed personnel have interfered with some voters going to poll. But large and by, surely the security people are supposed to be deployed to guarantee security, to ensure security of the polls. So in Kenya, the point is that, yes, they can respond to that, and I hope they will. But at the same time, the simmering tensions and so on are a signal to something very explosive that can happen. So deployment of security personnel to guarantee security is very important. Back to you. I've answered to your thing that yes, there are lessons to pick. The independence of all this, the lessons to pick in the historicity of Kenyan politics and the elections. There is also something to do with the, but I cannot pick a lesson as a Ugandan on the security apparatus of Kenya in terms of guaranteeing security, because I know what has happened there, where they come in too late, where they come in and could not even manage, they get overwhelmed and so on. It shows the degree of preparedness that sometimes required to be upped up. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Edgar, we're winding up. We have 15 minutes at the top of the hour, but I'm picking everyone's comment on what lessons are we picking from Kenya, especially for the East African community, but also particularly for individual countries. We have seen the issue of the role of security forces in elections in the community itself, the entire community, because in the different states we see, particularly Uganda, we have such a bad name out there for involving, the police in our affairs. Edgar, what lessons do we pick moving forward for Uganda, but also for the community?
What lessons do we pick? I think the thing that has eluded us, the one aspect that has eluded Uganda is having a peaceful transition from one president to another. We've only had a change of guards. I think the attempt at peaceful change of guards being the change from Binaisa, was it? No. The change from Lule to Binaisa was a little bit peaceful, but we know the circumstances under which it happened. And what lessons do we pick? There are many events that turn on information that is not available to the public. The rapprochement between the Luo community and the Kikuyu community did not just happen, like I said earlier, falling from the sky. There were efforts behind the scenes from the so-called deep state. Mama Ngina, the mother, the former first lady, widow of late Jomo Kenyatta, and mother to, she's the matriarch of the Kenyatta family. In the aftermath of the last election, and the attempt of Raila to swear himself in as a president or as de facto president of Kenya did shake the establishment, and they came to an understanding that for Kenya to be able to remain sustainably stable, there will be need for a rapprochement between the Raila and Odinga family to end the over half a century feud that had remained unresolved at that point. Now, the information I have is that Mama Ngina did call the deep state Kikuyu from the Kikuyu community to go for a retreat. I'm told the persons who appeared in that retreat are ex-service chiefs of the security army, and those ones who had retired at the rank of permanent secretary, to go for a retreat and come up with an agenda for transition beyond Uhuru. And that's when the Build Bridges initiative was born. Now, why am I dwelling on this? I'd like to emphasize the aspect of the elite. Any elite class, be it the political elite, be it the economic elite, be it the security elite, in any given society, can be the vanguards for sustainable stability of any unit or any setting. It's incumbent upon the elite, the intelligentsia in Uganda, to pick those critical lessons, to pick from the experiences of the Kenyans, to inform our own processes. I engage in political risk analysis for companies and other investors that want to set up in Uganda. I can assure you, from the kind of questions and boxes to be ticked that they send, as indeed Sarah Bireete has indicated, Dr. Bireete has indicated, Uganda is a fragile state, and there's no Fortune 500 company would want to invest in a fragile state like Uganda has been presented. I can assure you, whatever kind of spin doctoring you put forward, we come off very bad. We come off very bad. We come off very bad. And as such, it's the reason Uganda continues to attract the kind of investors we have. Blue chip investors with no experience, startup companies, and many times they fold within a few years, sometimes a month, from the time they've been set up. And therefore, we the Ugandan citizens continue to lose because of the politics in this country. So it's incumbent upon us, with the intelligentsia, with the so-called elite, to call upon or to call out those people who influence things in Uganda, that what we are doing is not sustainable. It's not sustainable in the long run, and it's in the best interest of all of us if we organized, if we prepared for a peaceful transition, if we fostered a Uganda that is stable. And there's no magic wand to it. It's not rocket science. There is a neighbor just next door to pick lessons from. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Edgar. Miriam, as we wind up, what do you have to say about our day's conversation?
I also want to echo what Edgar has just said. A peaceful transition is something that has eluded Uganda for years, ever since independence, and so far we can't do anything permanently, especially attracting investors, if our politics are not stable, are not predictable. Even for us, the local Ugandans, it's like that's why we sometimes even have high corruption. I would like to think, because people in government say, "Oh, anytime the government, anything political can happen, and I lose my job, so let me grab enough and try to stash away for my family." But it's possible to have a change from that. If we had to pick a lesson from Kenya, the Kenyan elites, the academia, the civil society are so instrumental into building democracy in Kenya that we admire so far, especially the private sector, the business community, the people who really as stakeholders in a nation have grown from the political class to the common man in Kenya. And that's something we still lack. Our civil society in Uganda is so lean on ground. Our academia is sleepy somehow. You don't see them anywhere in as far as politics is concerned. We have a high number of educated youth, but so far they are doing nothing. They could be politically organizing, but you don't see anything. And organizing politically doesn't mean, really frontline politics, but you can influence change at your local community, at your regional body, at your national level. You can influence change even in your member of parliament. You can talk, you can advocate for change. There are several ways we can influence politics by not directly participating in it, and everybody, including public servants, I'm sure they can play a role in that. And I wish to call upon our security forces, like Sarah and Simon said, They are well trained, they are professional. I don't know why they allow themselves to be used as an institution. Can't they stand on their own and so enough is enough? We can't play the dog politics that you are dragging us into. I mean, something can happen. We don't expect the security forces to influence politics when they are fighting wars or staging coups. I think they can advocate for change. They have so many bodies they can talk. I think they can stand up against the politicians and say, stop using us. This is our constitutional mandate, and they can draw a line to that. So I'm calling upon the security forces of Uganda, where you are in the army or you are a police leader, anywhere you are, please, can you be patriotic more than your partisan? Can you love your country more than you love your political leader? Because we need a stable Uganda. All of us today and tomorrow, we need Uganda. We know leaders, whether they insist on ruling for decades, they will soon go. But we have to think for the future of Uganda as Ugandans. And I want to call upon Sarah, you didn't answer my question as election monitor. Are you looking at the Kenyan diaspora voting? Because, okay, as election monitor and also as civil society, because I know in Uganda, it's the civil society which plays a big role in advocating for change as far as the rights, the civil rights and participation is concerned. So is Uganda really working towards having the Ugandans in diaspora voting in 2026? I think that's something all of us should focus on right now if it's to happen. And lastly, Lynn, I want to thank all the panelists because they've raised all the issues really we should all of us be thinking about going forward as East African citizens, as Africans, and most importantly, as Ugandans.
All right, thank you, Miriam. Dr. Sarah, kindly answer Miriam and give us your parting shots for the day.
Well, I think I wouldn't differ more from Edgar, Miriam, and what Simon said towards the end. Really, for Uganda, the writing is on the wall. It is a shame, and everybody should get bothered that for 60 years of independence, we have failed to internally hand over power from one leader to another peacefully. I know that President Museveni likes claiming to be a revolutionary and successful leader, but a successful leader without a successor is a total failure. For 40 years, he's holding on to the country. His leadership has automatically set into diminishing returns. He claims to be the only one with a vision, as if when the Ormayors Uganda will end. Does he ever ask himself if he's the only one who is capable of leading Uganda, whether Uganda will be buried with him? So my call really to him is that it's not too late. He can still and set Uganda free.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah. Thank you very much, Edgar and Simon. Simon, do you have any parting shots for us? When we look at the East African community, we're going to pause as Kenya. We're going to watch, of course, as Rwanda goes in its own pause come 2024. Thereafter, 2 years later, Uganda will be going into its elections. There's a lot going on as individual countries. In your parting shots, what message do you leave for us?
Thanks so much, Lynn. I think this has been a very interesting discussion. I want to appreciate the very well-informed and I must say educated discussion, and you could see the minds, fine minds, people who speak from experience, who speak from their knowledge, and who have as a good heart to the region and also to Uganda. I want to associate myself with the fact that we have to learn lessons from others. And as a community, we need to, now that we have a common travel document, it is just a part of the development of the integration. And we cannot achieve the federation unless there's a degree of internal democracies that should evolve. And I see a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. Somebody argued that it is the tunnel at the end of the light. But I think to me it's true that we have the light at the end of the tunnel. Each of these countries have their own peculiarities. You cannot cut and paste. What obtains in Rwanda, you can't paste on Tanzania, and neither can you paste on Uganda or Kenya. So we pick what we think is the best suitable, because internal dynamics really inform a number of processes. The issue of longevity in power, that I leave to you, the voters. We're all voters and those political players to ensure that there is as a change in elective politics as much as we would desire it to be. And then, of course, I also hope that East Africa should, I think, form a lessons learned unit at the Secretariat, and we use those lessons to improve on the internal policies of each of these with a view to approximating and standardizing democratic practices, not necessarily uniform like United States. They're not uniform, but there's a degree of approximated practices that make the US as a wholesome unit to have some general standards that others can emulate, despite those internal differences between states. So yes, we shall pick lessons from Kenya, but there are things also we must develop and engender internally that we think can make us much better than others. So thank you so much for this conversation. I'm so grateful for each of the colleagues. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for making time to have this interesting conversation. We still have 22 days to go to Kenya polls, so we wait to watch how that happens, and perhaps more conversations in line with that, and of course what happens for the Uganda diaspora show. Thank you very much. I wish you all a lovely weekend, and we'll catch you again next time.